Today I'm going to show you how to do a little bit of watercoloring and make a quick card using the Joyful Christmas Stampin' Up! Stamp set. So let's get started. I went ahead and pre-stamped this, but what you would have done is taken your stamp, inked it up with Gumball Green, and then just tapped it down a couple of times on the stamp. So we are going to take these, and you just need a little bit of adhesive. And we're going to line that up. I'm just going to eyeball it on our cardstock base. Then I'm going to take, this time I want to use my Designer Series paper. This actually came from the Designer Series Stamp-A-Stack pad. The Season of Style Stamp-A-Stack pad, which is great because it's all ready for patterns, all ready for the cardstock. All right, so I'm going to set that. In order to watercolor, I like to use the Stampin' Up! Watercolor paper, and I've cut this one down already. You also are going to need the Stays-On ink, and the reason that you use the Stays-On ink is that way when you apply water, it doesn't bleed. All right. I'm going to try this. Okay, perfect. Here is my finished poinsettia that I've already cut out. I'm not going to watercolor up the whole flower, just enough to start to show you the general idea. I like to take my pad, slide it out, get a little ink right there, and that will be my watercolor palette. So I take my brush, and I swizzle it in the ink, and then I like to just go in and find the area that I think should be the darkest, so the undersides of the leaf. I'm going to start with those, so those can be my shadow. The aqua painters are great. It's easier than using a watercolor brush, and it allows you just to spread the color, and you can see that my color is getting lighter and lighter the farther I get. So then I can just go back and dab my color. Start with the dark spot. Now, when you're working in watercolors, you normally want to work light to dark because you can always go back in and make something darker. But what you can't do is go back in and make something lighter. So I am going to be able to make my top leaves darker in color. Like if I want to change up and use a different color, I could apply a darker color, but I can't apply a lighter color on top. So when I go back in to do my shadows, I can just do a couple different passes of color to get the richness that I'm looking for. So I might do one layer on top of this nice light leaf, really lightly, come back in, add a little bit more definition, and then come in just to try and work around the edges of the leaf and work in those details from those valleys. If I think I'm starting to run out of color, all I really need to do is grab my ink pad, squish it together again, or swipe my brush on the top of the stamp pad. And that will give me the color that I need. If I swipe it on the stamp pad, you can see that it's really saturated and really beautiful. So, I'm not going to finish the whole one, but you get the idea. Work in layers. If you have a hairdryer handy, if you want to dry a layer, you can just go in, dry up the whole thing, and then come back and work on it later. Now I always like to, when you're going to change colors, just wipe your brush off until it runs clear. Then, for example, if I want to hit the yellow in the center of the flower, now that I have a clean brush, squeeze it, push it apart, get my brush in the yellow, and then I can just touch those yellow centers. And if I wanted to give just a tiny little, sometimes the poinsettia leaves have like a little bit of a look of orange, I can go in, I can hit the center of a leaf just to give it a little bit more color, wipe it off, and then if I wanted to take my early espresso for some nice rich brown, I can go in and just deepen up the shadows that I might see, and that just helps give it a more realistic look. Right around the leaf, along the vines, and it's just kind of fun. So play with that. Again, the aqua painters are awesome. You can use a regular brush. I just like to use the aqua painter. That way I don't have water on my table putting anything in. So I've also got to watercolor some leaves. So I've done a quick wash of crushed curry, and then I'm going to go and take my gumball green, and I just kind of want to give an overall little bit splotchy on the gumball green on my leaf. Now, so the leaf has some detail lines, and leaves typically have places where they're darkest and where they're lightest. So I'm going to go and take my saturated color and go along those lines. So I'll have just right around the outside, and you do kind of a swooping movement, and that gets that little bit of definition that you'll see on a leaf. Then I'm going to go in, and I got out the garden green, and I'm just going to hit just the edge to make that green the darkest. There. So here's my base. Let's take a little glue, put my Joyful Christmas down, and then I just want to make sure I'm not covering up the Christmas. And my flower's dry now, so I can tap on it and it's not a problem. You don't really want to do that when it's wet. You also, watercolor paper is designed to be much thicker so it can absorb the water that you're putting in. So it is going to take just a little while for that extra water to evaporate. All right, so now I want some leaves there and there. All right, that looks great. I do want to take and add some crystal effects. So what I'm going to do, sometimes I like to keep a pen in mind so I can make sure I can open it again. And I just am going to take a tiny little bead of crystal effects and dab it on those yellow centers we did earlier. Try and give them a little space so they don't touch and run together. But there we have a great watercolor Christmas card. Thanks so much for stamping with me.